The thermometer stopped making sense 3 days ago, not because it broke, because it ran out of numbers. Minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That is not a temperature most humans will ever experience. That is not a number most people believe is real when they first hear it. At minus 70, exposed skin freezes in under 60 seconds. Metal snaps, like dry with diesel fuel gels into a paste. Engines that sat outside overnight will never start again. Breath does not fog it. Crystallizes instantly into a fine white powder and falls straight down to the ground like ash. And somewhere in the deep interior of Alaska, one man is living through it, alone, in a steel hut shaped like a half-pipe buried in snow. This is not a story about someone who wandered into the wilderness on an adventure. This is a story about the choices a man made, the systems he built, and the knowledge that keeps him alive when everything outside is trying to kill him. Every single object you see in that hut has a reason for being there. Every decision he makes from the moment he wakes up to the moment he forces himself to sleep is calculated. Because out here, one mistake does not cost you comfort. It costs you your life. Let us start with the building itself, because most people look at a Quonset hut and see something primitive, a half-cylinder of corrugated steel with wooden floors, a glorified shed. They are wrong. The Quonset hut was originally designed during World War II to be shipped anywhere on Earth and assembled by 4 men with no construction experience in under 4 hours. The military built over 150,000 of them. They survived Pacific typhoons, Arctic winters, and desert heat because the arch design is one of the most structurally efficient shapes in existence. There are no corners for snow to pile on and crush. There are no flat roof sections to collect weight. Every inch of snow load is transferred down the curved walls and into the ground. At minus 70 with 4 feet of snow outside, that arch is holding back thousands of pounds of pressure without a single crack. But raw steel alone would kill a man faster than the cold outside. Steel conducts heat. Touch it with bare skin at minus 70, and your hand fuses to the surface instantly. So the interior walls are lined with oriented strand board, OSB, a dense, layered wood panel that acts as both a vapor barrier and an insulation backing. Between the steel shell and the OSB, there is spray foam and rigid insulation board packed tight. The result is a building that holds heat the way a thermos holds coffee. The outside temperature can swing 40 degrees overnight, and the interior barely registers a change. The floor is hardwood plank, not because it looks nice, because wood does not conduct cold the way concrete does. Stand on a concrete floor at minus 40, and the cold pulls heat straight up to the soles of your boots. Stand on hardwood, and you have a fighting chance. Every single material choice in that hut was made for a reason. Nothing is decorative. Everything is defensive. Now look at the wood stove. That cast iron box sitting in the middle of the hut is not heating the space. It is the reason the space exists. At minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the human body begins losing core temperature faster than it can produce heat. The metabolic furnace running inside every person has limits. Push past those limits and hypothermia sets in. First confusion, then drowsiness, then a dangerous warmth as blood vessels dilate, then unconsciousness. Death follows within hours. The wood stove prevents all of that. But running a wood stove in a sealed, insulated space at minus 70 is not as simple as throwing in logs and lighting a match. It is an engineering problem that demands constant attention. First, with selection. Not all wood burns the same. In interior Alaska, the dominant tree species are white spruce and paper birch. Spruce burns hot and fast, good for getting a fire started quickly when the temperature has dropped overnight. Birch burns slower, denser, longer. A birch log loaded into a stove at midnight will still be pushing heat at 4 in the morning. The right combination is critical. Too much spruce and the fire burns through the wood supply twice as fast. Too much birch and the fire is slow to respond when the temperature swings suddenly and the hut needs rapid reheating. Second, the chimney. The stovepipe running up through the ceiling and out the roof is not just an exhaust channel. It is a pressure system. Cold air outside creates a draft that pulls combustion gases up and out. At minus 70, that draft is powerful, sometimes too powerful. A roaring fire in a strong draft condition can superheat the stovepipe and cause a chimney fire, where creosote deposits on the inner pipe walls ignite. Chimney fires burn at over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit and can burn through the stovepipe in minutes. In a structure where the stovepipe runs through a wooden ceiling, that is a catastrophic house fire with zero emergency services within 50 miles. This is why the stovepipe is inspected every single week. This is why creosote is burned off deliberately with controlled high-temperature fires on a regular schedule. This is why there is always a fire extinguisher within arm's reach. The fire that keeps him alive is also the most dangerous thing in the hut. Third, and this is the one that kills people who do not know what they are doing, carbon monoxide. A sealed, insulated space retains everything, including invisible, odorless combustion gases. A wood stove burning improperly, green wood, restricted airflow, poor draft, produces carbon monoxide in quantities that can be lethal within hours. The man in that hut runs a carbon monoxide detector. He checks it every morning before he does anything else. Because carbon monoxide does not wake you up, it puts you deeper to sleep. People have died in well-built winter shelters not from the cold, but from the fire they built to stay warm. Now, the refrigerator. Stop and think about this for a moment. There's a full-size refrigerator plugged in and running inside a hut where the outside temperature is minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Most people see that and assume it is redundant. Why would you need a refrigerator when the entire world outside is a freezer? Because that is exactly the problem. At minus 70 degrees, food does not just freeze. It freezes solid in ways that destroy cellular structure, rupture containers, and makes certain foods completely inedible. Fresh vegetables frozen at minus 70 do not thaw back to normal. They turn to mush. Eggs freeze and crack. Canned goods with high water content can rupture their seals. Condiments separate permanently. Even foods designed to be frozen, like meat, suffer quality damage at extreme temperatures well below what a standard freezer operates at, which is typically around 0 degrees. The refrigerator maintains a stable temperature between 35 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit on the fresh food side. That is the biological sweet spot where food stays fresh, bacterial growth slows to near zero, and cellular integrity is preserved. It protects the food from the cold the same way it normally protects food from the heat. The compressor is running. But instead of fighting to dump heat out of the box, it is fighting to keep heat inside the box against the cold ambient environment of the hut, which even with the wood stove running hovers in the low 50s overnight. The freezer side is set to 0 degrees, standard freezer temperature, protecting frozen goods from the extreme cold that would push them to minus 70 if left unprotected. The refrigerator is not a luxury. It is a precision food management system, keeping a 3-month supply of calories in viable condition. Look at what is visible inside it. Fresh produce, citrus, leafy greens, root vegetables. These are not items you can replace with a trip to town. The nearest town with a grocery store is potentially hours away by snowmobile in summer. In winter at minus 70, that trip is either impossible or involves risk calculations most people are not willing to make. Every orange in that refrigerator represents a previous supply run planned weeks in advance. Every item was chosen for caloric density, shelf life, and nutritional coverage. Speaking of calories, the human body at minus 70 is a furnace running at maximum output. Basal metabolic rate in extreme cold increases significantly as the body works to maintain core temperature. Physical activity, chopping wood, checking the structure, moving supplies, multiplies at demand. A man working in genuine minus 70 conditions can burn between 4,000 and 6,000 calories per day. That is nearly twice the standard daily intake for an active adult. Running a caloric deficit in those conditions does not make you tired. It makes you dangerously cold. The body, starved for fuel, begins reducing blood flow to the extremities to protect the core. Fingers and toes are the first to go. Frostbite sets in quietly, without pain in the early stages, because the nerves themselves are too cold to fire properly. This is why the shelving on the right side of the hut is stocked with canned goods, dried goods, and high-calorie preserved foods. Variety is not the point. Caloric density and stability are the point. Peanut butter, canned fish, dried legumes, grains. These foods store without refrigeration, survive temperature fluctuations, and pack enormous caloric value into small physical volumes. Water is the hidden crisis of extreme cold survival. Most people assume that surrounded by snow and ice, water is infinitely available. It is not. Snow must be melted. Melting snow requires fuel. Fuel is finite, and melting snow is shockingly inefficient. It takes roughly 10 cups of packed snow to produce 1 cup of liquid water. Running the stove hot enough to melt snow continuously throughout the day consumes wood at a rate that is not sustainable long term. The solution is strategic. Large volumes of water are melted during the peak heat periods of the day, when the stove is already burning hot for warmth. That water is stored in insulated containers inside the hut. Leaving water in an uninsulated container overnight, even inside a heated hut, risks it freezing solid by morning if the fire burns low. The bucket visible near the stove is not decorative. It holds water in a warm zone close to the heat source. The stove and the water storage exist in a deliberate spatial relationship. Now look at the left wall. Every tool hanging there is telling a story about what can go wrong. Wrenches, pliers, hammers, screwdrivers. These are not workshop tools kept for hobby projects. These are emergency repair equipment for systems that must not fail. The stovepipe, the generator, the structural connections of the hut itself. At -70, calling a repair service is not an option. Waiting for a part to be shipped is not an option. When something breaks, it gets fixed with whatever is on that wall, or it does not get fixed. And if the wrong thing does not get fixed, a man dies. But here's the critical detail that most people do not think about. Metal tools left outdoors at -70 become brittle. The molecular structure of steel at extreme cold loses a ductility that makes it useful. A wrench that would flex slightly under heavy torque at room temperature will snap cleanly in half at -70. This is why every tool lives inside the hut. Not because the man is tidy, because cold tools are dangerous tools. Every morning before any outdoor work, tools that will be used outside are warmed first, either near the stove or kept inside jackets during transport, so they retain enough flexibility to function safely. The jackets hanging near the entrance are not piled there carelessly. They are staged. Each layer has a purpose and a sequence. The base layer against skin is wool or synthetic moisture-wicking material, never cotton, because cotton absorbs sweat, loses all insulating value when wet, has killed more wilderness survivors than almost any other single factor. Then an insulating mid-layer, then a wind and waterproof outer shell. Each layer traps a thin film of warmed air against the body. The stack of those layers is what keeps a man alive during the minutes he has to be outside. Minutes, not hours, not half hours. At -70, outdoor exposure time is measured in minutes before fingers, cheeks, and the tip of the nose begin showing the white, waxy patches of frostbite. Every outdoor task is pre-planned before the door opens. He knows exactly what he's going to do, in what order, and how long it will take. There is no improvising outside. There is no going back for a tool he forgot. The door opens. The task executes. The door closes. This discipline is not paranoia. It is arithmetic. The window at the far end of the hut is small and double-paned. In extreme cold, windows are thermal weak points. Heat bleeds through glass far faster than through insulated walls. But the window serves a function beyond light. It is a psychological survival tool. Total sensory deprivation in an enclosed space over weeks and months produces measurable cognitive deterioration. Something as simple as being able to see the snow-covered tree line outside, to watch the light change through the brief hours of Alaskan winter daylight, anchors a man to the passage of time and the reality of the world outside. Without it, the interior of the hut becomes a sensory chamber that erodes judgment and stability faster than the cold does. Interior Alaska in winter has between 3 and 5 hours of usable daylight, depending on the month. The LED light hanging from the center of the arch runs on generator power or battery backup. Light is not comfort in this environment. Light is operational necessity. Working in darkness with fire and sharp tools and heavy equipment is dangerous. The light stays on. The generator that powers it runs on stored fuel calculated months in advance. Sleep is where survival science gets complicated. The body repairs itself during sleep and regulates core temperature through a complex hormonal cycle. In extreme cold, sleep is both more critical and more dangerous than in normal conditions. The wood stove cannot be left unattended for a full 8-hour sleep cycle. It will burn through its fuel load, and the interior temperature of the hut will begin dropping. A man deep in REM sleep will not notice the temperature dropping around him until it has dropped significantly. So sleep is managed in structured segments. Fire is loaded with maximum fuel, dense birch logs, before the first sleep period. The first wake cycle, typically 4 to 5 hours later, involves reloading the stove before returning to sleep. This is not insomnia. This is fire management, built into the biological schedule. The go bag visible in the lower right corner of the hut is the last line of everything. Inside that bag is a redundant survival kit, emergency rations, fire-starting materials, emergency blanket, first aid supplies, a personal locator beacon. If the hut catches fire, if a structural failure creates a dangerous situation, if something goes catastrophically wrong in the middle of the night, that bag goes over one shoulder and out the door in under 30 seconds. It contains enough resources to survive for 72 hours while waiting for emergency response, the minimum window for a rescue operation to reach interior Alaska in winter conditions. The personal locator beacon is the most important object in the bag. It does not require cell service. It does not require internet. It does not require anything except pressing one button, after which it transmits GPS coordinates via satellite to a rescue coordination center that contacts the nearest available emergency response team. It has saved lives in conditions where every other form of communication failed completely. 3 months alone in a steel hut at -70 is not an experience that breaks a man who went in prepared. But preparation is the entire story. The difference between the man who comes out in spring healthy and the man who does not come out at all is not toughness. It is not willpower. It is not even experience, though experience helps. It is systems. The wood supply is a system. The food management is a system. The tool organization is a system. The sleep schedule is a system. The outdoor exposure protocol is a system. Every single element of that hut working in coordination with every other element, miss one piece and the whole structure, both literal and practical, begins to compromise. The Quonset hut is not surviving the Alaskan winter. The man inside it is surviving the Alaskan winter. The hut is just a tool he built to do it with. And somewhere right now, with the temperature outside beyond anything most thermometers can measure, the fire is burning, the refrigerator is humming, and the tools are warm on the wall, because he planned it that way.